All right, Mark, do you want to take it away?
Okay, welcome everybody to the December ChicagoLand SharePoint Users Group session, a virtual session that's been going on for some 15 months now. We've just got done with all of 2017, and we'd like to wish you a very happy Merry Christmas and holiday season coming up. Let's see what we've got in store for today. Today's agenda is always going to start with understanding SharePoint's purpose. It's always going to be a big picture slide with Mike Blumenthal has graciously created a quick slide to help me get through recent news and upcoming events. That also includes the Office 365 stuff. We're going to take a few minutes out to do a recap of our entire 2017 year and what we've managed to cover. I think we'll see it as a team, as a group, as a club, if you will. We ought to be pretty proud by what we've accomplished. We're also going to spend the majority of our time diving into what I'll call, and if you remember this from previous sessions, call it a member challenge. Somebody voiced up 2 sessions ago, how can we use Microsoft Teams to empower a school faculty, not the student body, which is already being done, but the school faculty. And we're going to dive in how you even begin solving that problem, what kind of findings came out of learning about Microsoft Teams, a demo of Microsoft Teams, a little mock-up that I put together on how you might use it for a school faculty, and as time permits, bring your own problems. I suspect that the member challenge is going to take up the vast majority of the time, though. Let's dive into the next slide. Big picture stuff, understanding SharePoint capabilities. Empowering technologies are those kinds of things that improve what you should already be doing. We've seen the slide before, SharePoint is an empowering technology. It empowers collaboration at all levels. It fits on all 4 stages of what MTech calls its collaboration maturity model. Number 1 at the bottom, communicating. It empowers that. 2, sharing. 3, tasking. And 4, tracking. Sometimes even SharePoint empowers other Microsoft technologies, and that's very apropos and relevant today because we'll find out that under the hood of Microsoft Teams, Microsoft's hot new technology that's going crazy in the year 2018 is in fact, yes, you guessed it, SharePoint. Let's go dive in a little bit more. News and events around the area, keeping things on your radar. Michael reports that all of Skype is going to merge into Teams throughout 2018 and even into the first half of 2019. What does that mean? Microsoft Teams, Microsoft is utterly committed to this technology, this chat-centric collaboration technology that it's throwing its hat in the ring, and that's where it's going to be going. So everybody should be expecting that your Skype is going to evolve over 2018 into that Teams. Also, Windows 10 has a fall creators update that includes support for OneDrive files on demand. That's the return of the file placeholders, but even better. Remember, this is no longer synchronizing, it's putting little placeholders or little pointers, shortcuts for every single file and making it searchable on your desktop while not actually storing the file. I am so looking forward to that. Office.com has got a recent update. LinkedIn data is now coming into the people card, starting with the targeted release. You can see this in SharePoint and OneDrive and in Outlook Online. Microsoft Word now has a resume assistant that integrates with LinkedIn. How cool is that? LinkedIn learning videos are now available within the help pane of Office 365 desktop apps, showing this increasing connection, this integration between Microsoft's various products. And there's a new forecasting feature that's in Excel that you can bring data in and use it to actually do, this is machine learning. This kind of forecasting says, we're going to take this data and we're going to use it to predict what's going to happen in the future. That's something that we all want to be paying attention to and asking ourselves, how can we dovetail that into SharePoint, dovetail that into Power Apps, and start building applications that have that kind of capabilities. Watch for that in early 2018. Events on the horizon. If you attended the SharePoint Fest December 5th through 8th, Michael says you were in for some really cool stuff. He had a wonderful time. If not, you missed some great content, and he's going to be talking about that in early January 2018. Looking ahead to 2018, in fact, the first ChicagoLand SharePoint Users Group session is going to be on January 17th, and we'll talk later about what's on the agenda for that. The Office 365 Adoption User Group is going to meet in February. There is going to be 2 SharePoint Saturdays, one in the suburbs in the spring, one in Chicago downtown in the fall. Start looking for blurbs on at least the spring event coming up in the next few months. Ignite's going to be back in Orlando in not 2018, but in 2018. There's going to be a SharePoint NA in Las Vegas in early May, or rather in May of 2018. And SharePoint Fest for Chicago continues to be popular and is going to return again in December of 2018. That's just a few things that are on the horizon. I wanted to promise you guys a recap of 2017. For those of you that have been with us, there's been a very nice, steady evolution, of growth, not in many different dimensions in this users group in the last 12 months, and I'm terribly pleased about this. I had a chance to even talk to some people at Microsoft about the steps that the progress that we've actually been making. Specifically, in the month of January, we were talking about the 2016 Feature Pack Power Apps. We did a tour and a demo of Power Apps and Power BI of Microsoft Flow. In February, we did an even deeper dive into more Power Apps, looking at actual demos that I had built, applications, things like that. Excuse me. And trying to dive a little deeper into Power BI, looking for that place where these two tie together and still integrate with SharePoint. March saw us diving into Microsoft Teams for the first time, and Ralph Rivas, one of our members, began helping us with a tour into the SharePoint framework, the SPFX. April saw us diving in even more into SPFX with some more sample apps. I helped out with that, along with some SharePoint Designer-based site provisioning solutions. So we continue to put one foot in the future, and one foot where we need to be, not in the past per se, but the world out there is still filled with SharePoint Designer workflows, SharePoint Designer-based solutions, and InfoPath-based solutions, and it looks like it's going to be that way for the next 1 to 2 years. So we continue to put a lot of focus on helping people understand how to contrive solutions that are based on those technologies. May saw us continue to do a SharePoint Framework deep dive, again with the help from Ralph Rivas. June also into SharePoint Framework extensions by Ralph Rivas, and we had a talk on ITAR compliance related to security. July saw us do a tasking deep dive, really focusing on tasking as that key aspect. Step number 3 in the 4-step collaboration security model, talking about tasking in project sites and dashboards. August, we returned back into Power BI, Power Apps integration with a real-life example by one of our members, Jay Champagne. September saw us integrating using SharePoint. We saw some real-life examples of some enterprise-level, non-trivial enterprise-level integration between SharePoint and Salesforce. I've got some background noise. If we can mute that mic, please. October saw us going over, we consumed nearly the entire event, the entire session, talking about Ignite highlights. Mike Blumenthal was that excited about it. We squeezed in a little bit of time, on communication sites from Microsoft. November, we happened to have to skip, duty calls, nothing more than that. And today we're talking about a member challenge, Microsoft Teams applications. So those are all of the different topics, some old, some new, some cutting edge, some bread and butter type of stuff. What I want you to pay attention to is the steady growth that we had in membership throughout the last 12 months. We grew by 6 members in January, by 8 in February, by 12 in March, 6 in April, 11 in May, in June and July we saw 8 and 6. In August, a big spike of 18 new members, 5 more in September, nearly 20 more in October, 1 in November despite the cancellation, and 6 more even in December, and it's not over yet. This is really, really impressive growth considering it's a virtual session and people have to take time out of their lunchtime to attend. On top of that, we saw our attendee growth in these sessions go from an average of around 2 to 3 at the very beginning to now we had over 22 people RSVPing and coming into the session today. Do we get to see all of those people actually manage to get into the class? No, but they're RSVPing every single time. They're saying, yeah, I'm going to try to come, and that actually makes a big difference. What's the big takeaway? 2017 actually had a lot of stuff in it. We touched on a lot, most of the key technologies that Microsoft wants its people to be aware of, while still staying firmly embedded in the tools that are available to us now and looking for practical, pragmatic best practices and solution patterns. Increasing membership and attendance and member participation across this entire session for the entire calendar year. My thanks to everybody. It's you guys participating that actually makes the big difference. Time to dive into the member challenge for the remainder of today's session. And if we get done a little bit early, that's fine. Recall that in a recent session, about 2 sessions ago, one member voiced a challenge that he was facing. He worked in a Chicago school system. He had Microsoft Teams implemented, if I recall, but he mentioned it was only being used by the students at that time. And the question that he had was, what are some ways that Microsoft Teams could actually be used by the faculty to derive even more value? It's one thing to empower the students, and that's great, but the faculty is what you're really investing in. You're trying to empower those people and make their lives better, more productive, their work more productive. The big question at the bottom of the slide is, how does one even go about answering that question? I mean, is there some kind of a plan? Is there a systematic way to do it? The first hint, bringing it to a ChicagoLand SharePoint users group session, is actually a really good start. One approach that you guys have heard about multiple times in the last 12 months is performing this thing called a right mapping exercise. If you recall, the goals or the steps of a right mapping exercise was to understand the people that you're working with, understand the organization that you're working with, the activities, the processes that they're involved in. You have to fully understand those processes and even document them. You have to next understand the technologies that are available, their features, their strengths, their weaknesses, so that you know what not to try to use. Lots of times there's overlap in technologies, and if you slip into the habit, or you make the mistake rather, of using the weakness of one technology when you should be using the strength of a different one, you're going to find yourself inextricably going down a path that's very difficult to write. So you want to understand those technologies up front. Once you know those steps 1, 2, and 3, you start right fitting the strengths of each technology to the people and to the activities. Then you roadmap out some practical way to roll out any changed or any new technologies. In other words, you might not be where you want to be right now, but you know where you need to get to because of the right fitting, and you're going to figure out a roadmap for how you're going to get there. What's the result? Right fitting and road mapping gives you this it's right mapping. I misspelled it. You get right mapping your technology to your application. Another result is that the people are ultimately empowered to perform their activities with greater productivity. That's what you're striving for. Some other tips on how to approach this kind of a problem are, with social and collaborative technologies like Microsoft Teams, which is secretly SharePoint and Outlook under the hood, try to get the technology into the hands of as many users as possible. Chances are this kind of technology will evolve on its own, but it's only going to evolve on its own if you get it into as many people's hands as possible, so that you get this what's the word I'm looking for, critical mass starts to form, and then the evolution occurs, and the things that aren't useful get dropped naturally, and the things that and you're constantly mutating and changing and seeing how your organization might decide they want to use it. As long as they're productive, what do you care? That's tip number 1. Tip number 2 is, don't try to come up with a complete solution on your own. It's not your job. Your job is to try to empower them and put the tools in their hands, but you can, like in number 3, do try to come up with a decent seed. And that's what I'll try to demonstrate for you today, which can then grow and germinate, even take on a life of its own. 4, don't think that you alone need to know what that seed should look like. You don't have to be the guy that goes up to the top of the mountain and comes back down 40 days later with a pair of tablets and a white beard and a glowing face. That's not your job. It's the job of the masses to actually try to figure out what works best for them. 5, expect and let your seed to evolve as the users take off with your solution. It might not even look like what you started with, but if they're productive, that's ultimately the big goal. 6, guide quite all right, but don't over control that evolution. Have a bulletproof backup in place, have really solid security in place, otherwise let it go. Just observe, step number 7, but don't interfere as that evolution takes place. You may be pleasantly surprised to find yourself reporting back to this session, back to this users group session, of some very interesting things that you learned. Looking at those particular steps and starting to follow them, then the first thing we want to do is understand the people. If you look any typical school faculty, what you're going to see is, and I actually use my own daughters as guinea pigs. They're both in college or out of college now, but they remember high school still well enough. And when I asked them, they told me there's different grades, there's different departments. Many teachers teach the same topics across the grades. So what that told me is it probably doesn't make sense to think of your faculty as being 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, and 12th grade. we're not thinking across grades. It was a quick way to rule that out. Instead, it actually made sense to be thinking instead of the departments that they're in. That they're in the science department, the economics department, the arts and literature department, history department, athletics department, mathematics department, science department, music department, that kind of thing. But any one teacher can actually teach both 10th grade music and 11th grade music, 9th grade economics and 12th grade economics, that kind of thing. Also, in a typical school faculty, many of them are involved in course-related duties, quite all right. In a higher level, they're involved in various school-related duties, and almost invariably, they're involved in some kind of extracurricular activities. They're involved in coaching, or they're going to be directing the school play or musicals. They're involved in concerts, things like that. We have to find a way to empower how that faculty interacts amongst itself to try to carry out those kinds, to try to be involved in those kinds of activities. Once we started understanding the people, the next step is to try to understand the activities. Typical school faculty activities involve preparing courses, assigning courses, evaluating courses, and even tracking courses throughout the semester and the school year. Next, it's preparing the classrooms, assigning classrooms, managing classrooms. It's preparing on a daily basis to teach. It's actually doing the teaching. It's preparing homework. It's assigning homework. It's grading and receiving and grading homework, and it's tracking homework. It's preparing exams, proctoring exams, grading exams. It's preparing final grades, preparing for conferences, attending and participating in those conferences, coaching teams, coordinating annual events, directing plays, musicals, concerts, participating in continuing education on their own, and maybe even doing some levels of research. That's a pretty hefty group of activities, but what it immediately says to you is that if you're working with other people, if you're collaborating, then potentially the introduction of a tool into all this kinds of collaboration could actually have a very profound and productive effect or positive effect on your productivity. Next, we've understood the people, we've understood the activities that those people are engaged in. Now we want to next understand the technologies. Specifically, we're focusing only on the features, the strengths and weaknesses of Microsoft Teams, because the goal is to find out ways to use Microsoft Teams in a school faculty. A description of Microsoft Teams, and this was presented on a previous slide, I think back in September, October. It's a platform for combining workplace chat, meetings, notes, and attachments, all in a friendly interface that can either be found on a laptop or a tablet or a mobile device. Organization will spawn various teams, and these teams spawn channels that represent projects or events, things like this, which in turn spawn streams, which really are conversations or chat-centric collaborations. Underneath each team, which is a group of people, is actually a SharePoint site. And this is one of the cool things we'll see in a few minutes in the demonstration. Some of the big strengths of Microsoft Teams and why Microsoft is so excited about it is that it's better than email for threaded communications and for staying focused. What I mean by that is you go into an inbox on a daily basis and you start looking down there for all of the different conversations that have to do with a particular project you're working on. Invariably, you're going to see another email that's completely unrelated. You look at it, you click on it, and it totally hijacks the rest of your day. That lack of focus, that you don't know that the conversations are all spread over everybody's different inboxes, that there's no one place you can go to keep the conversation on that particular topic, that's one of the key strengths of Microsoft Teams. Also, another strength is that the files are stored in an associated and automatically provisioned SharePoint folder in its own SharePoint site for each team, and that it's all editable alongside that running conversation. Very cool functionality. You've also got pinnable tabs that are at the top of the user interface of this Microsoft Teams interface that allows you to track conversations, files, notes, budgets, Power BI, planners, and in fact, there's almost 40 applications currently available that can be added into these sites and into these team pages to try to lend themselves towards empowering collaboration of different sites. And that gets me excited because I know that what's under the hood is my beloved SharePoint. Some more strengths are Microsoft Teams is already mobile ready. For that, imagine a bunch of teachers with tablets and phones sitting around and actually updating and working on all of the different events and assignments and activities that they have. Wow, talk about empowerment. especially if you've got a school system where you have hundreds of teachers. In fact, it's not unusual for a school of 4,000 students to have a faculty that's got somewhere between 400 and 500 educators. So you're talking about a very large increase in productivity if you can multiply every little change, every little improvement by 400 or 500 people. Another strength, that's accessible to multiple people in multiple places. You have a lot of different devices that can be used. Individuals can regularly participate in multiple teams. You're not stuck in any one. So a teacher can be a member of the science department and the athletics department where they're coaching, and also be participating as a director on a school concert that's coming up. You can inject feeds from other social media sources like Twitter into a stream. So if there's students talking about a particular activity and they're doing it on Twitter, you can bring that Twitter feed into the faculty-based Microsoft team on that exact same subject. You can have easy to embed files and images into your conversations. Very, very useful. Each team automatically gets its own SharePoint team site. That's where everything gets stored, managed, version control, secured, etc. It integrates chat-centric collaboration very nicely, since that's the core. And it's got cool tools like Planner, a tool that's embedded into the channels themselves. I see lots of potential there because that's the third step. Planner allows you to actually do the tasking, and even step 4, do the tracking. That's part of a more mature collaboration model. There's also lots of other new apps that are being added to Microsoft Teams constantly, and we're currently at about 40 of them so far. You'll get a chance to at least see the icons today, but what I'm hoping is that in January and February, many of our members are going to step up and say, hey, I'd like to demo that one for 5 minutes at the next session. Here's what we're doing with that particular app. Let's continue. We know the strengths of this tool now. We know the people, we know the activities, we know the strengths of the tool. It's time to do the right fitting. Where can Microsoft Teams actually fit? Actually, it fits really well in any collaboration centered around high velocity chatting and file sharing, where you've got teams operating in the same general time zone. Because hey, you're chatting in real time. You don't need them on the other side of the planet. They're going to be asleep. Where you have teams, or with teams where membership is optional, elective, and not assigned. So it can be very dynamic, very fluid, and in environments where you've got teams whose methodology is not strictly structured. So it can be fluid and dynamic. What's the upshot? Microsoft Teams actually does seem to be a very decent fit for a school faculty. How? The teams that are available in Microsoft Teams become your various departments. There might be other ways of organizing it. Certainly there are. But departments is a very logical, very natural, very intuitive one. Each team then gets its own SharePoint team site, complete with libraries and folders. The channels that are going on, or topics, become various events and projects underneath each department. And we'll see a couple of examples of that. The streams that are inside each channel then become various conversations regarding those events and projects, and multiple people can begin participating. Heck, you could even start inviting students in at that level, and now you get synergy formed between the faculty and the student body. Time for some demos. Time for a demo. We're going to look at a mocked-up team site for a school faculty. It's just bare bones. What you're going to get a chance to see is the normal Microsoft Teams interface, and off to the side, I don't have it on my phone, but I wanted you to know that there actually is a mobile app version of it that has some really great security features as well that we haven't finished enabling at MTech yet, which is why I can't show you on my own phone. But at least I wanted you to be aware of the strong similarity in the user interface, that you don't know the difference between using it on a tablet, Microsoft Teams, and using it on a phone. And it's the phone that's going to make all the difference in the world here, is that if you empower the faculty to be able to do their collaborating in Microsoft Teams on an app on a phone, then they get to take advantage of all those itty-bitty little time slots that they have in their day. 5 minutes between one class going out and one class coming in. They get to go and do an update. 30 minutes that they have in the lounge while they're working on their notes before their next lecture. 30 minutes on the way home from work, something like that. That's going to fit the needs of a teacher in a faculty of a large school system, and I see a great deal of possibilities there. Some of the other things that you're going to see in this mock-up are going to be the difference between the desktop version of Microsoft Teams and the web-based version. What's the upshot? They're virtually identical. There's no difference. It doesn't matter which one you use. One's just a little faster than the other, but it does not look any different. Some other things you're going to see is that inside your inside a team site, you're actually going to see that there's inside a team, you're going to see the ability to open it up in SharePoint, which really is going to show you an entire website complete with a document library filled with different folders. It's really a skin almost on SharePoint underneath. It's like giving SharePoint a new face. Same technology, same feature set, different user experiences being applied. What a clever thing to do by Microsoft. Another thing that you're going to see is all of these different applications that are available to add inside these teams. And again, that's what I'm going to be asking help with and inviting members to start exploring and coming back and tell us what you find in early January, February next year. And we're going to jump into the demo now. What I've got is a sample here. This is me opening up Microsoft Teams. Let me close it and actually show you where this all starts. We're actually in my calendar. I'm in Office 365. I'm in the calendar that's a part of Outlook Web Access. And if I go up to the waffle menu, then in Office 365, I see that one of the tiles, one of the apps that are available to me is Microsoft Teams. If I right mouse click on it and choose to open in a new tab, then I can see the user interface. So imagine I'm at a public computer, it's not mine, I don't have the app running, I don't have my phone handy. I can always get into Microsoft Teams using this particular interface. I simply go into Office 365, log in, go to the waffle menu, and go and bring up my team. Now I have access to everything that's going on. You're not going to see a lot of activity because I didn't have anybody helping me participate in populating it. But what I want you to focus on is this, that in the standard structure of Microsoft Teams, you have these elements that I've highlighted here and here and here. These are the various teams that get created. And in the previous slides, what makes sense for a school faculty is that those teams represent different bodies of commonly found people in a school system. I certainly wanted to include West High everyone, so that this includes even students in addition to the faculty. But for the rest of these, we've got the West High faculty in general, that's everybody, the whole faculty. Then we break down into smaller teams where we've got West High, the mathematics faculty, the science faculty, the athletics faculty, the list goes on. So we've created a very granular structure. It's granular enough without being excessively granular. It gets us down into people that have a common interest. In any one of these areas, like West High, everyone, we've got all of the different channels, meaning the different events in a school system. There might be other projects that are also there, but school systems tend to be very event-driven. There's a new ball game. There's a new concert. There are exams that are coming up. There is some kind of an event like prom, like conferences, actually let me open this up for everyone. We've got a fall concert. We've got homecoming. In my own daughter's school, there was a Mr. Handsome contest. We've got prom. We've got snowball. Each one of those would serve very nicely as a channel inside Microsoft Teams, and all the people that are a part of that team would then be able to contribute on an ongoing basis to conversations and to collaboration around those particular events. Focusing exclusively on a faculty, at the highest level, the entire faculty, we're going to have conferences in the fall and in the spring. We're going to have fundraisers. We're going to have various in-services that have to be gotten ready for by everyone in the organization, not just a particular department. But if we dive in a little bit deeper, we might see that in the mathematics faculty. There's certainly going to be general topics, but there might be other things that are outside the pedagogy. There's things like math club, or there might be, let's say, a math pedagogic conference for the fall of 2017. And I tried to flesh this one out a little bit. Let's say the math faculty is actually having a conference. They're hosting it in the fall of 2017. This particular West High mathematics faculty ends up being its own team site. That team site ends up spawning this channel. The channel ends up being just a portion of that site. And seen through Microsoft Teams, what we see is that a channel is made up of conversations where you have an ongoing conversation here that multiple people can participate in, everyone in the entire faculty for the math department. But there's also files that are going to be available that have something to do with preparing for this pedagogic conference. There might be a banner that's going to get posted in the front of the school, presentations that are going to be submitted to see if they're going to be accepted, etc. There's a wiki that I haven't actually fleshed out, but You could create an entire super hyperlinked Wikipedia type of an environment if it makes sense for you to do that. More importantly, if this is some kind of an event that has a lot of tasks and things that are going on, then you're going to want to have some kind of a work plan. And here I actually added an app, and this app is actually the Microsoft Planner app. It was available as one of these tiles. I'll just quickly go here. And when you scroll all the way through here, you see that Planner is one of the tiles that's available, and I added it on. And then I started adding up all of the different to-do tasks as if I were the project manager. And just for an example, you can see that in all of the bucket type of lingo that's used to talk about Microsoft Planner, it doesn't have to look like a Gantt chart. It's just a bunch of things to do with deadlines on when they're due and who's actually going to be working on it. And we see that for this particular work plan, 2 of the 3 things are already done, and there's 1 that's actually still being worked on. So we've got the ability in these Microsoft Teams team sites to actually have conversations, so that's communicating. That's step 1 of collaboration. We can share files with each other, and these files can actually be edited in real time concurrently. So you've got the ability of people to co-author content. 2 people can be working on a Visio banner. 2 people can be working on an Excel spreadsheet that's trying to cost out what this particular endeavor is going to be for the school. You can have multiple people working on it. We've accomplished file sharing. The next step in the collaboration maturity model is the ability to assign tasks and actually say, Kevin is working on something, Mark's working on something, Stan Molda is working on something, and be able to ultimately track it. So what you really see inside this thing called Microsoft Teams is the ability to hit all 4 tiers of a mature collaboration model. Is there still work to be done? Yes, but it's got me very excited because it's taking the power and the strength that was already present in SharePoint and finding another way to deliver it that's very visually compelling and intuitive, and also mobile for the users to be able to interact with it on a mobile device like a tablet or a phone. That's what got me the most excited. You see here then a pattern for being able to very intuitively, very naturally create various teams that make sense to an organization. Oh yeah, that's everybody in our school. Oh yeah, that's everybody in our faculty. Oh yeah, that's everybody in the math faculty. Hey, I'm a part of the math faculty. I'm going to be spending a lot of time in this particular team and in all of these different channels. I'll be dancing back and forth, either working on files, participating in conversations, but it's a very natural, very easy way for me to navigate through all of this while still keeping my hand on the very big picture here of what's been going on in the school system as a whole. And there's room for growth here, that you can add more and more channels on underneath each faculty. You might actually add a couple of additional teams, but not to the point that it becomes overwhelming. It's still just a relatively modest number, a manageable number of teams to try to navigate. Typically in user experience design, UI UX design, whenever you give a user a choice, you want to try to limit the number of choices to 7. There's kind of a magic number out there. You give them less than 7, they're going to want more granularity. You give them more than 7, they're going to feel overwhelmed. We're getting awful close to that. We've got everyone, we've got faculty as a whole, we've got all of the individual faculties. We're coming very close, that it's quickly in this user interface to get to the particular team I'm interested in at that particular moment. I got 10 minutes between classes. I want to go and work on stuff that's related to math pedagogy. We also say that there's only a few choices to be made underneath each faculty, like the math faculty, so it's easy for me to decide and differentiate which of those channels I want to participate in. Once I'm in a channel, it's easy for me to decide, hey, am I just participating in a conversation, or are there some files that I need to work on, or are there some tasks I need to work on? I have not overwhelmed anybody with too many choices and made them hard to find. Another thing that I wanted to show you that got me excited was, even while this represents a very interesting, compelling user experience for collaborating with people, it's still possible to simply open up this entire team in SharePoint. And when you look at this, this is kind of surprising and very pleasing for me. What we see is that West High Mathematics faculty is actually a team site. It's actually a website in SharePoint. So that means that every one of the other channels are mapped to other team sites inside a larger SharePoint structure. if I only want to stay inside the math faculty, then what I start to see is that all the documents that are related to the math pedagogic conference are actually in a folder in a document library. That if I go inside the document library one level up, and I guess I have to log in again here. Give me a moment. My logins time out every 15 minutes. So I just had to log in again. Once we look at the document library itself inside this particular channel, channel is a team site, what I see is that there's a new folder that's been created for every single channel. So it's a very nice, very slick, very automated way to try to organize all the channels, or to organize all of the content that's coming in. Do I have to worry about creating that structure? No. Microsoft takes care of it for me. So for new users, they never actually have to be exposed to this and worry about interact with SharePoint and then go back into Teams. Instead, they only interact with the Teams user interface, and it's all handled automatically for you in SharePoint. That's an approach that resonates very strongly with MTech. We use that same solution pattern in some of our other solutions for customers. The other things that you look at is that when you click on conversations, in fact, this gets dovetailed back into Outlook. So the conversations don't exist in a completely different construct somewhere. Instead, excuse me, conversations are actually a part of Microsoft Outlook. So they're stored in a very easy to use format. I don't have to be in Teams to participate. I can actually be right inside my Microsoft Outlook and still participate in the various conversations. Let's jump back in here. If I click up and go to home, it'll take me all the way back to the West High Mathematics faculty and a landing page for that particular channel. And this landing page of this website for the mathematics faculty, for that team rather, instead of channel, actually has a whole lot of stuff. It's like your own little mini intranet just for the mathematics faculty. It's going to float up any news that's already that you want to add here. You're going to be able to answer additional questions. We've got automatically tracked activity of what's going on inside the library or inside various conversations. You can view and share files, and you can even add your own custom lists. So Microsoft has actually said, hey, teams are kind of static things. What they do is fluid, but the team itself is static, so let's give them their own little mini version of an intranet. And I can see that the people that are in this faculty are my colleagues, Stan Molda and Kevin Anderson. So if I wanted to go and connect with them, I could do that simply without even leaving this particular page. I also have access to some kind of a notebook that will bring up a OneNote notebook as part of the website. And we'll let that load really quick. Let me go kill this Outlook mail. Oh, actually there was some cool stuff there. Here we see an entire OneNote notebook that's been created just for the mathematics faculty. You can think of it as this scrapbook that you can put anything and everything in there that represents the tribal knowledge that you want to add on to this. You can even organize all of this information by adding additional tabs and building it out. But at least it's there as a start to give people that are in that mathematics faculty the idea that, hey, if they share content here, it can share it in a very unstructured format. It doesn't have to be overly constraining, and they'll still be able to share it with all of their other colleagues. Let's hit the back button and go back to the home page of this team site and see if there's a few other details that I want to share with you. I have kind of a slow connection to the internet, so thanks for bearing with me, everybody. All right, while that's loading, I'm going to still jump back into the team site here. What we end up with then is a solution approach that's very natural and intuitive for a school system because it uses concepts, it uses ideas like faculties, everyone, the name of the school, in a very intuitive manner that people quickly identify and say, hey, that's me, I'm a part of the faculty. Hey, that's me, I'm a part of the mathematics faculty, without actually over constraining them, that people can be a part of a math faculty while still being a part of an athletics faculty or participating in as an assistant coach on the football team, something like that. It gives them access to the things that they're going to want to do on a daily basis participate in conversations, share files as being the predominant things that mark collaboration in a school system. But it doesn't prevent you from being able to create a various way of assigning and tracking tasks as well, so that you cover that third tier of collaboration maturity, that you're assigning tasks towards trying to achieve a common set of goals. And you end up with this entire interface available to you either in a browser or available to you as a completely standalone application as well, so that it can be sitting in the corner running. And on top of it, you end up with it also being available to you as a mobile app. Let's jump back into the slide deck. I think we made really good time here. It'll probably be the first time this year we didn't go over. One of the things we didn't get to spend a lot of time on is that Microsoft Teams has lots of these different apps to look at. Oops, sorry, I gotta. There. Let's dive into a discussion. Where would we go from here? We would, one, let the faculty create various event-centric channels. Give them a starting place, and then say, hey, what other events are you guys participating in? Go and add those channels. That's going to give them a sense of familiarity with this environment, and in fact, it may take off in areas that you don't expect. Next, you want to empower that faculty to actually use the mobile app. I cannot stress that enough. I think the mobile app is what's going to get people super engaged, because it gives them the luxury of being able to use a few minutes while they're at the lunch table or while they're in the parking lot and they just parked their car and they're walking into class just before class, to be able to squeeze in that little extra bit of productivity. They're laying in bed before they fall asleep at night, or they're watching television with the rest of their family. Blue Bloods is on, and there's a commercial. They go and they work inside the mobile app to continue participating, making every free moment count towards helping to be, in their already busy lives, towards helping to be as productive as they possibly can. Lastly, you're going to explore all of those cool new apps that can be added to a team, apps for tasking like Microsoft Planner, even apps for tracking, maybe Microsoft Planner, maybe some of the other 39 ones that are available. That's where I think that this whole solution needs to go. I haven't let anybody talk even a little bit. Any questions, any comments, any discussion from the rest of the people? I see we've got 12 people that are here today. Can we turn on mics and see if anybody... I think, yeah, Jamie, I think yours, I think you if any one person wants to speak, there's a little hand-raising icon that you can click on. Let's try it that way.
I've unmuted everybody.
Okay.
So if anyone, yes, for those of you that don't want to speak, feel free to just put yourself back on mute.
Matthew. Everybody else mute. Come on, what do you think?
I think it's great. My question is more kind of overall. I've been in SharePoint for a few years now, and how do you think these team sites fit in with traditional architected intranets, where we have that top-level site with some department pages and specialty sites and search centers and all that? How do we? I mean, are those going to slowly kind of go away, and we're going to promote people to use these team sites, or are these team sites more for like a department or project-specific activities, like in your opinion?
We saw that the team sites. Do I have the answer for you, Matthew? I don't, but I have some guesses. The fact that every one of these teams ties back to a team site already means that we're finding a way to imagine that you've got a larger hierarchy of sites that you've architected as a SharePoint architect, and you've come to your organization and say, I think this is really the most intelligent way we should build out. All this does is focus in on one particular branch there that has to do with all of the different team sites and say, hey, here's a very healthy, very productive way to build out those sites, not in a pre-structured way, but in an ad hoc way. So you're only building it out on an as-needed basis. And that actually fits very nicely into Microsoft's original vision, literally a decade and a half ago, that was all about distributed and delegated administration of the websites. That was all about saying no tiny handful of people at the top of the mountain can actually manage everything that's going on in SharePoint, can actually develop all of the solutions and then support all of the solutions in an entire organization. So let's find a way to empower people further down into different tiers. Let's distribute and let's delegate various authorities. Teams has literally been given the ability to say down at to the various managers in these teams, go out and spawn all of these additional challenges, or sorry, all of these additional channels. I see that as a very clever way to try to start with a fixed structure, but be able to build it out laterally to create all of these different team sites. The only thing that I would watch out for is that those team sites all appear to be living inside the same site collection. So as a farm administrator, if it were an on-premise, I'd be watching that site collection's associated content database to make sure it doesn't get overly large. But if this stays up inside SharePoint Online and Office 365, then Microsoft already has those kinds of scalabilities built in so that the size of that site collection becomes less and less important. Me, I get excited by this. So it's just a part of a larger structure that is more dynamic than the rest, but because of that, possibly empowers a lot of productivity. What do you guys think? Anybody else want to raise their hand? Brian, this was originally, I think, something that came from you. Am I remembering correctly?
I think Stephanie raised her hand. I don't know if you're on mute, Stephanie.
Stephanie,
No,
go ahead.
I was just going to add to the fact that I used Teams throughout my latest position, and I loved it. I used it for projects that would come into our queue. But the one thing that I would like to see added, and I'm sure it eventually will happen, is the ability to have different users added to different channels, when now it's just based on the team itself.
Give me an example, being as specific as you can without breaching any kind of security. What's going on, Stephanie?
Well, there would just be like a more general team, maybe for a particular project, but then a channel that I would have created, sort of like a branch of that overall project that just involved certain team members that I didn't want to necessarily have everyone seeing.
Okay, like a little squad. So if you got a bigger team that's a faculty, you go and you delegate 3 or 4 people and say, go and work inside this channel, and you're the only 3 that go in.
Right. Because
okay.
Otherwise, everyone will get notified, of activity, like in the conversations tab of that particular channel.
Yeah. I see where Microsoft seems to be heading with this, that teams map into team sites in SharePoint, that channels map into, and the files in there map into folders, that if you can implement folder-based security on the files, then I see it being a fairly straightforward stretch for Microsoft to implement some kind of sub-team level security on that same channel. That if they're already halfway there, that they'll get folder level security on the files, so then they just have to come up with channel level security and being able to name a subgroup of people. And as long as we keep asking, as long as people keep participating and people contribute to making their suggestions, this kind of evolution is absolutely going to happen in 2018. In fact, from what Michael was telling me, coming out of Ignite and coming out of SharePoint Fest and other channels that he has access to, the Midwest Geeks, Microsoft is very heavily committed into Microsoft Teams as being, gosh, I almost want to say the next generation SharePoint. This is how a lot of people are going to perceive SharePoint. They're going to think of it only in terms of, oh, it's that stuff that I see underneath Teams when I'm working inside Teams. So you're going to see a lot of commitment to us getting deeply involved in the first couple of months of 2018 and saying, all right, where should we be going if we've been nothing but SharePoint all these years and we've evolved from SharePoint on-premise to SharePoint on-premise and up in the cloud? Where do we go? Where does it make sense? Where's that? What should our roadmap look like? Those are going to be some of the questions that we tackle. Jolien, I see that you've got your microphone on. Have you got something to say?
Not really. I'm pondering this from outside organizations. In the school example, to take an example, what if the teachers and administration needed to collaborate with parents? Can parents be folded into this thing, or does everybody have to sort of be part of the formal organization?
Oh, that's actually a really great question. We know that in SharePoint, in Office 365, and in the SharePoint sites, you can actually invite people as what are called external users at no cost, and they have access into your SharePoint sites. So you're paying for your Office 365 subscription, and you can have any number of external users as long as they've got a Microsoft account. Even if it's a free one, Hotmail, Outlook, you name it, they can get into those websites. I do not know right now if there's an external user type of metaphor for Microsoft Teams. Stephanie, what have you seen so far? Or Brian, if you're on.
Hey, Mark, this is Dan.
Yeah.
Just to follow up, guest access for Teams is on Microsoft's roadmap. It should have been rolled out by now, but apparently they're having some problems implementing it. But it is on the roadmap because I believe Slack has it, and they're trying to catch up feature-wise. So it's on the roadmap. Guest access should have come, but it's just not there yet.
Yeah, imagine.
This is Brian. It has been implemented and rolled out, but it is not a viable solution for the schools because it basically it allows for external collaboration, but it does not allow for individual access to a specific person's stuff in their team. So for a school, what we want external access for is for the parents to have access to their students' OneNote, notebook, and assignments. Right now, what guest access does is gives the external person guest access to the whole team.
Oh, not to an individual student.
Correct. It gives them guest access to the whole team. So just like they were another student, they can come in and they can see all of the SharePoint files and conversations and so forth, but it's not limited to, you just have access to Johnny's OneNote.
Yeah. So if you wanted to implement, given the security that's available and the external user functionality that's available, you would have to spin up a team for every student in your school in order to provide the security that you're trying to look for. Would that be an accurate understanding?
Well, that'd be accurate in that aspect, but you wouldn't have the outcome that you would want because the content is based in the class team, not the individual person.
Let's continue looking at that. That actually poses some additional challenges that we should be trying to address in the very near future, say in the January and the February session. Do you think that, was there any value in today's session so far from you, Brian?
Unfortunately, I had a prior engagement when you guys rescheduled, and I was just getting back in, and it took me a while to get a link from somebody to get in. So I'm just now getting into the thing. I'm going to have to go back and watch the
recording?
The recording, yeah.
Yeah, please let us know your feedback on this. And I'm not taking any notes right now, but I would very much benefit from you guys going into the meetup site after this and actually going in and throwing in a couple of the things that we talked about today. Certainly it's on the recording, and I'll go back and listen to it prior to January, but I see this as being an excellent first step towards continuing to flesh out a larger solution for a school system. What I don't want to miss out on is these additional challenges. The challenge of, one, how do you allow individual people to have one notebooks and be able to access them through Teams? So that's going to be one, like a student, each student has a OneNote notebook, and inside there are going to be their homework assignments, and we want the parents to be able to get access to them. That raises the next challenge, which is the parents aren't actually paying for this, or are they? Now, that would raise another interesting question, that what if the school system started charging the parents a couple of dollars every month to have an Office 365 subscription? Would that be enough for them to be able to get in and actually and access their students' homework and participate that way? So we're literally creating a virtual school system inside Office 365. That could be a really interesting topic for this coming January. Were there any other?
Because I don't see that being viable. Because see, the student themselves has their own notebook under their 365 login, but the ones that we need to give parents access to are the classroom notebooks, of which in that class notebook the students have their own section that they only have access to.
Yeah.
But that's completely outside of, that's a segregated thing controlled by the teacher.
Understood. And part of what we're doing in these last couple of minutes is just trying to define that particular problem a little more clearly than previously known.
Typically the way it works right now is the student just gives their password to the parent, and the parent logs in as a student. And
nice. Yeah, we all know that that's probably an undesirable approach, isn't it?
For the student, yeah.
Yeah. Hey, let's not try to solve this problem. Let's just try to define the problem today so that we're pondering it over the next couple of weeks in time for continuing this. I see the next session then as continuing where we actually picked up. Let's segue in and finish the last couple of slides. It's already 12:56. Next session, January 17th, 2018. More cool stuff as it becomes available. It's going to be our regular agenda, just like always, plus we're going to start diving in a little bit more on some SharePoint Designer workflow tips and best practices. Why? Because at the last month, 2 weeks ago, at the Midwest Geeks Association, I flat out asked some of the Microsoft MVPs in the area what the roadmap is for SharePoint Designer and SharePoint Designer workflows and for InfoPath. What are we going to do for forms in 2018? What are we going to do for workflows in 2018? Are we supposed to be doing Microsoft Flows? And the answer was a resounding no. The answer was, for the foreseeable future, continue to recommend as consultants to your customers and as developers in your organization, continue to build SharePoint Designer workflow solutions, continue to build InfoPath forms, because there is no viable solution in sight. That's what we're going to be working on. So we're going to continue talking about that. Give me just a moment here. Oh, I've got a link to an RSVP that Elizabeth is wanting to share. I think she already put it down there. Great. The second thing that we're going to be covering is Microsoft Teams a little bit more in depth. What I'm asking of you people that are attending today, Brian and Cindy and Dan and Jamie and Jolie and Matthew and Peter and Stephanie, we've got 40 little applications in here. If there's one that you've already been working with, Stephanie, if there's one or two you've already been working with, Brian, and you think there might be interesting, I want to just give you 5 minutes. You don't even have to construct slides, nothing. Just a little demo where we hand over the screen, and for 5 minutes you say, hey, here's something cool we did with the wiki. Here's something we did with this thing called pop-in, and what it is, or the Adobe Creative Cloud, or anything that might be going on. Well, you have to try to understand these, and it's actually an overwhelming number of slides or a number of apps for me to try to tackle between now and January 17th. I need your help. The group needs our participation. So I'm going to post something up on Meetup asking for people to say, I want to talk about this one particular one, SurveyMonkey. I want to talk about this one, Smartsheet, and what might be able to do with it. And we'll end up with a really fun January 17th session. Is everybody cool with trying to do that, or does everybody freak out when I say I want you to talk for 5 minutes?
No, it just means I have to actually start using some of them.
Yeah, exactly. I only know, I know 9 of these out of 40. 9. The rest I'm looking and saying, okay, Jira, you know, that's just a code repository, but I don't know how it would work inside here. Hey, let's go take a look at it. What is VSTS? Don't even know what that is, or unless it's Team Server or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, majority of them aren't applicable for a school environment. So I mean,
I'm asking that you pick something that you think might be relevant to you if you're not already exploring those particular areas. I don't want you guys chasing stuff that's not relevant. Everything I come into a presentation to talk to you guys about every Wednesday, once a month, is stuff that I've actually been working on directly. I hardly ever just invent something for the sake of inventing it. It's been directly relevant. It's the only way I can squeeze in preparing a presentation into the rest of my workday, is if it's actually directly applicable to my day-to-day work. So just think about that and watch the Meetup site. You'll probably get emails to that effect. I'll be nagging you guys until I get at least 2 or 3 people participating and saying, okay, yeah, I'll do 5 minutes. Last slide. Special thanks to Michael Blumenthal, Ralph Rivas, and Jay Champagne, who were instrumental in offering up multiple presentations throughout the year. We really thank you for your regular contributions to this particular group. And the last slide, Merry Christmas, everybody. It's the end of the session. It's the end of the season. Thanks for a great 2017, and bring more friends in January 17, because this is turning into a users group that's actually getting noticed by Microsoft. Just wanted to let you guys know. Thanks, everybody, and have a wonderful season. We'll see you on January 17th.
Take care, guys.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.